I want to talk today about Russell Brand's recent interview with Megyn Kelly, which seems to be both marketing for his upcoming book, How to Become a Christian in 7 Days, as well as crisis PR for his numerous allegations of SA. Before I get started, I need to be very, very careful with my language in this video because no one really knows what's going to trigger the YouTube gods. I did recently have a video that was literally just about parent-child abuse, nothing graphic, that got demonetized. So when people say like, oh, it's not true that like saying certain things gets you demonetized on social media, absolutely false. It's really hard to guess what those things are going to be, but you still have to be careful, unfortunately. So when I say SA, that means this. When I say PDF file, it means this. When I say physical intimacy, that's a euphemism for this. And when I say grape, it means this. Now, this is the first time that I've watched something of Megyn Kelly's, and I was pretty horrified by how badly she botched this interview. She let Russell Brand get away with what I consider to be some pretty egregious manipulations. So I'm going to break down this interview minus the part where it was the two of them just like drinking the Kool-Aid together about politics, because that's not really relevant. Because I want you guys to become attuned to the way that people who are accused of predation very subtly manipulate the narrative so that you'll go easier on them. Let's get started. So let me set the scene. Megyn Kelly seems very charmed by Russell Brand, and it really shows in the softball questions that she throws him. Now, why might a woman who has underage daughters be such a softie for a man who's admitted to having encounters with underage girls? Well, this isn't the first time that Megyn Kelly has minimized the harm done by men towards teenage girls. She had this to say about Epstein.
But that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls. I don't know what's true about him, but we have yet to see anybody come forward and say, I was I was under 10. I was under 14 when I first came within his purview.
Personally, I can't stand it when we're talking about someone like Epstein and people say, well, technically he wasn't a PDF file. Technically he was a blah, 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 blah. I can agree that the younger a predator goes, the more abhorrent it is. But we have heard time and time again from these types of people that the more they progress into their disease, the more it escalates and the more their attraction goes younger and younger to increasingly disturbing ages. So please, can we not pretend that there's anything less than a paper-thin line between the two categories of predators that Megyn discussed? Also, the P word in question carries a lot of shame and stigma. And honestly, I think that anyone who is an adult and has an interaction with someone underage should carry that stigma. I think we don't go hard enough on people who go for older teens. The P word evokes something very primal in most of us, those of us who haven't had our brains fried by grape culture. We feel a very instinctual disgust towards those people, because if you think about it, of course we're going to feel disgusted with anyone who threatens our offspring, who threatens the generation that's going to take forward our species. I know that it's trendy these days for psychology professionals to feel empathy for these types of predators and to even platform them. There are literally therapists out there calling PDF files MAPs because it's less stigmatizing. But you're not going to find that here on this channel. So if you're looking for a safe space for predators, you might try one of the male therapists on this platform who's now going on his, 13th video trying to normalize PDF files, in one of which I'm told one of these interviewees flat out admitted to consuming explicit PDF content. And I sincerely hope that this therapist followed through on his responsibility as a mandated reporter. Or maybe you want to try Therapy Jeff.
Not to defend pals, but allow me to defend specifically.
By the way, I fucking called it. If you guys watched my Patreon video with my 2026 bingo cards, this was quite literally on my 2026 bingo cards. We do not need more people empathizing with predators. We already live in a world where so many excuses are made for predators. They don't see any accountability. They're protected by their power. Victims are shamed and blamed. And the fact that a lot of these male therapists think it's some sort of like moral virtue to show even more empathy to predators. During the year that the Epstein files came out and the CNN Grape Academy news came out, I just think that speaks volumes, personally. Anyway, got a little bit sidetracked. Back to Megyn Kelly looking dreamy-eyed at Russell Brand.
Where he came out and at the time was full of energy and a huge star. And even back then, I remember said something like, you're far less polarizing than people tell me you are. and we bonded immediately. Came onto the set. You had so much energy, positive energy. You were so kind. And I was in the midst of a terrible year there because it didn't go well for me at NBC. I wasn't liked by virtually any celebrities, and yet I found myself immersed in them. And it was so rare to have somebody come on the set and be so nice to me and like so complimentary. And I remember being like, I love Russell Brand. And actually somebody asked me a couple years after that, who was my favorite celebrity who I met, in my time at Fox and at NBC. And I said, Russell Brand, because you were so warm. You were so nice. You acknowledged the thing about being polarizing. You said, you're actually quite lovely. And I remember we had a laugh over it. And now, as I've watched you go through your, past few years and become this scourge of a certain section, I feel for you because they're doing it to you. Same stuff they've done to me. As soon as you get political, especially right-wing political, boy, they come for you.
Megyn Kelly strikes me as the type of person who, when allegations of abuse come out about someone, she says, oh, but he was so nice to me. Abusers can be extremely charming and usually reserve their abuse for just a select group of people in their life. And actually, a lot of the reason why they're so charming with everybody else is to insulate themselves from accountability when their victims do speak out. I thought that Megyn's point about how they come for you once you get political was very telling. I get the impression that Megyn very strongly identifies with Russell because she's felt scapegoated in some way for her right-wing views, and she thinks that that's also what's happening to him.
But maybe they're not true, and maybe this did come up because there was a new agenda when it came to your name, and it was much more interesting to silence you and smear you. And honestly, Russell, I'm not diminishing anybody's story. I don't know what happened, but I can relate to this to some extent. I have seen myself get attacked by different groups over the years when you fly too close to the sun or when you're over an issue that's this particular group's favorite issue and they need you to say it in a different way or feel a different way, that I now am very suspicious about massive harms that come to people when they speak out on a particular issue or in a particular way. It happens over and over and over.
And this goes along with something that the two of them talk about later in the interview, which is this theory that the powers that be have this log of every single bad thing that every one of us has done in our lifetimes, and they weaponize that information and whip out that file on us the moment we start to criticize the deep state.
As Edward Snowden revealed at the time, they have all the information they need on you. So if in one day in the future you become an enemy of the state, they will find something with which to criminalize you if that should be required. Mm-hmm. God forbid that is ever required in anyone's life. But if it happens, they've got the information. As to the second part of what you're saying, why did it happen when it happened? Because a documentary was made that framed my very explicit public behavior in a particular way. I believe that there is a strong connection between when it happened and what I was doing publicly. I'd moved from being acting in movies and being on TV and writing books and essentially advocating for the kind of cultural values that most people within the institutions of power and entertainment power endorse and espouse, to being quite critical of them, openly critical of the pharmaceutical industry, the British government, bureaucratic agencies that have unelected power that we often are taxed for and are funding. And in COVID, I really started to find a voice for something I'd long felt, that real power is inaccessible to ordinary people. I'd got into a lot of controversy and trouble in around 2015 when I was thinking of running for mayor of London, when I'd said there's no point voting for anybody because whoever you vote for, you're going to get the same institutions. And boy, does that seem apposite and perspicacious now.
Yeah.
When Me Too happened in 2015, I was like, wow, I've slept with lots and lots of women. I wonder if during this moment I'm going to face some allegations. And that did not happen. Because I think some people, it seemed, were facing allegations that maybe it looked like consensual activity reframed.
But again, that's one of the things that's very, suspicious about the allegations against you is that no one did come forward then. It wasn't until you got very outspoken in your more right-wing views that suddenly Channel 4 thought it would be a great time to do a hit piece on Russell Brand and found some women. I mean, it'd be the equivalent of going around and finding all the women who had slept with John Bon Jovi and saying, "Do you ever have anything that didn't feel 100%?" It's just when you go to a man who's been as exposed as you have, like a rock star, as you were describing, if you really, really, really lift up every sheet and kick every tire, you may find some women who are unhappy about their experiences. I'm not diminishing them. Maybe they're true, whatever. We'll find out at the trial. But maybe they're not true. And maybe this did come up because there was a new agenda when it came to your name, and it was much more interesting to silence you and smear you.
Listen, I'm not completely closed off to conspiracy theories, but I think it's important to use critical thinking, and I do have quite a few questions about this theory. First of all, do we actually have any evidence that that's what happened in this situation? Because it's not atypical for a group of victims to unite years later after the crimes have occurred, when they're older, when they've processed through it in therapy, and to seek justice when they have more power in numbers. That seems to me like a simpler explanation than the notion that the deep state has been holding on to this information about Russell and released it once he got political. Again, I'm not completely opposed to this theory, but I do need some tangible evidence that that's what happened here, not just unfalsifiable claims. Is it possible instead that people turn to right-wing politics and Christianity when they know they're about to be exposed for such allegations, because they know Christians tend to be forgiving if you appear pious and repenting, and because the right is, in theory at least, against cancel culture? There are many documented cases of right-leaning public figures who were accused of doing horrible things and maintained a prosperous career simply because the right takes pride in some level of vice signaling. Is it possible also that Russell had a heads up about the allegations that were coming, which often happens with hit pieces, for instance, reaching out to the person in question to see if they have a comment, and that he took this political and religious turn sort of as a preemptive defense? Is it also possible that the allegations came to light once he started being more outspoken about politics, because maybe his victims felt like he was causing more harm again with his views, and maybe they thought, that's enough, people need to know the truth about this guy? Another question: does Russell's persecution theory then imply that the deep state holds a leftist agenda? Because why else would it only target people who speak out with right-wing views? If the deep state contains powerful individuals all across the political spectrum, as both Megyn and Russell talk about in this interview, then why wouldn't they target people who are suddenly outspoken about left-wing politics as well? But let's assume for a moment that Russell's political persecution theory is real. Let's assume that the deep state wanted to discredit him for speaking out in a more right-leaning political way circa 2020. So in 2023, they published a hit piece on him for his sexual allegations. Even if that were true, it would not change what they had on him. Unless the implication is that, like, the deep state got these women to all completely fabricate their stories, it wouldn't change the nature of what their stories were about Russell. All of us, every single one of us, has skeletons in our closet. For most people, it's things like, I was a complete asshole when I was a teenager, or I used a substance, or I cheated on an ex, or I used a bad word without realizing the harm it could cause. If there is a deep state file on each of us, it probably doesn't contain SA allegations for the majority of people. So even if these events were brought to light as some sort of like political persecution effort, it doesn't change the severity of what they might have had on him. But of course, when someone switches into martyr mode, it makes it harder for other people to hold them accountable for the ways in which they might have themselves been persecutors at some point. So I can see why this is maybe a convenient narrative for Russell to run with. Anyway, let's hear how Megyn Kelly took a turn from initially condemning Russell Brand for his allegations to thinking that he was the victim of a smear campaign.
My next phase of you, well, I watched you during COVID and I loved all that, and I thought he's gotten very brave and very outspoken in a great way. Then came all the allegations, the alleged sexual assault and rape and and it first came in this UK, quote, documentary, and they use that term very loosely there and here. And I'll tell you up front, I was angry when I saw that, because they did it in such a compelling way that, especially the stuff about the 16-year-old, that I was angry with you. I believed what they said, or at least believed that there was enough smoke, there might be fire, and said to the audience at the time, the conservative movement doesn't need somebody like that. Like, we love what he's saying about COVID, but if this is a guy who's sexually assaulting women and taking advantage of 16-year-olds, we need to move on without him. And felt that anger for a couple of years around you, because I just thought it was so reckless and it was so wrong. And I knew that it might be false, but it seemed overwhelming, the way that they presented the evidence. And then the more I looked at it, the more I started to recognize I might not know the full story, because since then I have seen what the British government has done, what my own government has done to certain figures that it doesn't like. And I have an enormous amount of open-mindedness to, you are being railroaded and attacked by people for reasons having nothing to do with actual facts, but with your right-leaning stance on certain issues, your growing prominence as a figure in a bunch of discussions that they find very threatening. And honestly, I just reevaluated the whole thing and thought I need to be open-minded to having been wrong in my initial assessments, and I'm interested in a conversation about it all.
Did you catch that? She started to doubt the allegations, not because of any specific evidence that they were fabricated, but because of completely unrelated political gripes. What the British government has done, what our own government has done to figures it doesn't like. I'm imagining she's referring here to things like British free speech limitations or the deplatforming of people in the US who were spreading medical misinformation during the pandemic. I'm not a mind reader, but this is what I imagine she would be talking about. And this perfectly exemplifies how people with a conspiratory leaning mind fall prey to Darvo. Because Darvo goes, I'm not the offender, I'm actually the victim in the situation, I'm being persecuted. And someone who jumps immediately to conspiracy theory without concrete evidence goes, you know what, you're probably right. Probably the truth is the very opposite of what they want me to think. And that's, in my opinion, part of why we see so many alleged predators veering right once the allegations come out. Because they know people on the right are, generally speaking, more prone to conspiratory thinking than people on the left. And that's not a value judgment, it's just a fact. But again, Megyn Kelly didn't see any new sudden information that Russell Brand was innocent. What she initially judged him for, having a relationship with a 16-year-old, the facts of that haven't changed. If anything, Russell Brand admits to it in this very interview. So it seems like she made this switch from initially condemning him to going softer on him because she somehow identified with him or was sort of projecting her own experience onto what he went through. But I really want to talk about the dangerous conflation that Russell makes in this interview. He conflates his actions with something very different. It's a conflation that I find to be very manipulative. But before we get to that, if you find that your blood pressure is spiking during this conversation, you might want to go to that annual doctor's checkup. And a really great way to find one is using the sponsor of today's video, ZocDoc. I'm willing to bet there's some doctor's appointment that you've been putting off scheduling, whether it's the eye doctor, the skin doctor, your general practitioner. Nobody likes picking up the phone and needing to make an appointment at the doctor. No one wants to be told that they have to wait 6 months for an appointment. Some of us don't even know where to find a provider that's right for us, but you can literally nip all of these problems in the bud by just using ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website designed to help you find high-quality in-network providers, pick the one you want, and instantly book an appointment. They have over 100,000 providers in a wide range of specialties, and it's completely free. They show you which providers take your health insurance, you can see their reviews, you can choose the most convenient appointment time, often within 24 to 72 hours. So visit my ZocDoc link below to book high-quality in-network providers who can see you quickly. Thank you so much to ZocDoc. Back to Russell. So here's the part where, in my opinion, we see a very manipulative conflation from Russell. So Megyn is sharing how initially when she found out about these allegations against him, particularly with the 16-year-old, she was disgusted, she was feeling very angry with him. And Russell responds to Megyn with a sense of humility and self-awareness, and he thanks her for his anger towards him. Let's hear what he had to say.
Thank you, Megyn Kelly, for giving me the grace to address in particular your anger, which is entirely legitimate and recognizable. And the plain fact of it is that in Europe and in the United Kingdom where I'm from, the age of consent is 16. And I did sleep with a 16-year-old when I was 30. But when I was 30, I was a very different person. I was a lot younger and I was an immature 30-year-old. Consensual sex, actually, with a variety of people, when there is a strong power differential, as there is when you're a famous man that has the ability to attract women that I had at that time, I think involves exploitation. I think it is exploitative. I recognize that my sexual conduct in the past was selfish and I did not apply enough consideration, barely any, I suppose, really, to how that sex was affecting other people. The only matter that I would contest, while acknowledging, firstly, your right to be angry as a woman who, given what I know about you and the industry you've worked in, I'm sure that you have personal reasons for feeling aggrieved towards powerful men, because in spite of occasionally men coming to the forefront of the culture, whether it's the most hideous gargoyle villains as rendered and portrayed, or the more sort of innocuous and party boy style exploiters of women, a category that I suppose I must fall into. It's plainly something that exists within our industry and one might say culture at large. while I was transgressing lines of being a person that was sleeping with people because I had availability to not only, by the way, waitresses and strippers and fans and people, but like, you know, powerful women as well, or like powerful professional women that had gravitas and status and power. I was only really thinking of myself. And obviously I have to be careful of contempt of court, because that's a law in my country where I can't say anything publicly that might in any way influence a potential jury. But obviously, as soon as I've said I'm not guilty, what I'm in effect saying is I had consensual sex with lots of women, and you can argue that that's not appropriate. But the age of consent is an important thing. The ability to consent is an important thing, like i.e. drunk people can't consent, mentally ill people can't consent, children can't consent. Like, consent is what's important. And what fame gave me and what my addiction fueled was opportunity for endless consent, which led me to be a hedonist and a fool and an exploiter of women. And that is wrong. And that is something that needs to be redeemed and addressed and atoned for. What I'm obviously not only querying, but violently or aggressively or assertively opposing is the idea that this is a judicial criminal matter where consent was overridden. Actually, what happened is consent was directed. That's what being famous and being, if I may say, forgive me, charismatic affords you, is the ability to direct consent. That doesn't mean it's right. It's actually not right. It's wrong. It's a sin. It's an expression of selfishness and false idolatry.
Okay, so there was a lot to break down in that monologue, so let's just take it piece by piece. First of all, I thought it was noteworthy that he mentioned the age of consent, how his only moral crimes involved consensual acts, and the fact that he was an immature 30-year-old. Because even as he's seemingly taking accountability for his behavior, he's making sure to remind the viewer it's not illegal to have a relationship with someone who's 16. I was a different person then, and I was immature at 30 years old, which sort of leads viewers to think, maybe he was mentally 16 too, so it's not so bad. It's kind of how people think about Michael Jackson as like a child trapped in a man's body. Let me please remind you, this is what Russell Brand is accused of. He will be going to court because he's accused of 3 counts of rape, 3 charges of SA, and 1 allegation of indecent assault, with 6 women alleging crimes dating from 1999 to 2009. So his whole spiel about how, well, yes, it's immoral, but it's not illegal. Okay, sure, the age of consent is 16 in the UK, but Russell is not on trial for that. He's not experiencing legal consequences for that. And in addition to being immoral, those acts actually are illegal. But let's go back to the 16-year-old for a sec. Obviously, the age of consent differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There needs to be a cutoff somewhere, but it's not like the day before you're 15 to the day you turn 16, suddenly there's this like switch that goes off in your mind where you go from child to adult. Development is gradual. It's not a one-time cutoff thing. And similarly, the ability to consent also develops gradually, where sometimes it's maybe a little bit gray, which is why you have some jurisdictions who put the age at 18 and some jurisdictions that put it at 15. The reason the age of consent is often lower than the age at which a person is technically considered a legal adult, which is 18, is because teenagers are very interested in exploring their developing urges. Let's just put it that way. It's developmentally completely normal for them to have those urges. However, it's normal for them to act on those if they so desire with other consenting teenagers, with other people their age. That's why in a lot of states, for example, there exist what are called Romeo and Juliet laws, where the age of consent is 18 if your partner is over 18, but it's younger if your partner is around your age under 18. Because it's not right to criminalize 2 teenagers who are just doing what biology is screaming at them to do, but it's also not right for an adult to take advantage of them because they're not technically an adult yet by any other metric of the law, and an adult has a lot more power that they can weaponize against them. And most non-predatory adults will tell you that like anyone under the age of like, I want to say 22, looks like an absolute child to them. Like, I'm sorry, if you're under the age of 22, you're probably hearing this and you're like, no, I'm not a child. I don't look like a child. No, but you do though. To like people who are older, you look like you've just bloomed in this world. Like you are very fresh in this world. It's very obvious that you still have a lot of life experiences to go through, that you're still kind of naive and innocent in some ways. So most people my age, like 29 or certainly above, would never look at a 16-year-old and be like, that's someone who's on my level. That's someone I should have encounter with. Like, no, normal people do not think that way. Now, to be fair, Russell acknowledges that children can't consent. It's interesting then that the 16-year-old in question alleges he used to refer to her as the child. It's kind of odd to me that he would even bring up the legality of it under any circumstance, because the legality does not change the morality of it. If the age of consent were 13, would he abide by that? What about if it were lower? The age of consent doesn't change the fact that people of that age, arguably up to 18 or higher, should look like children to you as a grown man. But again, no one brought up the legality of this. We know it's technically legal. He's just using the legality to sort of detract from the immorality of it. Now, in his rambling monologue, Russell also acknowledges the power differential and the exploitative nature of his encounters as a famous charismatic man. But here's the conflation that I find to be incredibly manipulative. He's equating the power differential as a famous charismatic person with his power differential as a 30-year-old man engaging with a legal child. Those two are very different things. Sure, one might argue that it's always exploitative to have an intimate relationship with someone who previously had a parasocial relationship with you, who was a fan because you were famous. But I think for the vast majority of us, that's not something we're going to condemn as strongly as the thing that Russell is conflating with it. It seems to me like Russell is relying on viewers going, oh look, he's acknowledging wrongdoing, even to a degree that I find a bit excessive. Clearly he's repented. Clearly he's taken accountability. But no one is trying to hold Russell accountable for having lots of physical intimacy with lots of adult women while being famous. They're trying to hold him accountable for far more egregious claims. So the way this comes off is like someone saying, Your Honor, you're right. I did push that woman into traffic. I did very many bad things when I was an immature adult man at the budding age of, checks notes, 30. It's true, I did push that woman into traffic, but it wasn't wrong because it killed her. It was wrong because cars are blasphemy. It's man playing God with invention, and I shouldn't have been around cars. So, did I push her? Yes. Was it wrong? Yes, because cars are satanic. It completely misses the point. He also conflates casual encounters with many people with a form of sin and idolatry. He acts like the problem was some sort of blasphemous misuse of sexuality. But this makes it sound like the issue was not the alleged forced nature of his encounters or the fact that an adult man had an encounter with a teenage girl. It's that God wasn't involved in those encounters or something like that.
I provided a lot of material through my foolishness and my selfishness around women that meant that when I became not a person that was celebrated by the culture as a representative of individualism, hedonism, you're the most important thing in the world, there's no essentially acting like if there is a God, you're it. That's what the culture wants you to believe. It doesn't want you to have a higher authority to which you submit, that none of us have control over, that we're not the final say on what's right and wrong. God is the final say.
It frames it as if two grown adults having an encounter after meeting at the club is the same thing as what he's being accused of doing, when in reality those two are very far from morally equivalent. And it's very manipulative, in my opinion, to treat them as if they're the same thing. At one point, even Megyn starts catching on that he's conflating promiscuity and SA, but Russell just continues to conflate them even harder.
Yes, well, we're talking about sex here. We're not talking about sexual assault, which is very different.
Well, but it's still sex is sacred. Sex is sacred, and pornography desacralizes sex. Promiscuity desacralizes sex, making sex the apex of your identity, whether you're a heterosexual or not. It desacralizes sex. Mm-hmm. It's a holy power that I misused.
Russell also minimizes the impact of his encounter with the child by saying the following.
I didn't have a penchant for young girls, That's not my thing. Mm-hmm. That's not my thing. That's just...
it's just reading up on
it's like
this
a trawler.
Piece of your history. It's not like it's not a common theme that keeps coming up.
And Megyn eggs him on, saying, wow, yeah, it sounds like you liked a variety of different partners. Russell then does this thing that a lot of men who view women as sex objects do, which is to conflate lust with love.
I really liked older women, black women, white women, thin women, fat women. Oh, it's love. It's perverted love, actually. It's like, oh my God, you're so... And also it was sincere. The reason that I was sleeping with lots of people, I think, is because I see beauty. I see it. I see the beauty. I'm not like, oh, I'm just going to tell this ugly cow. I love you. I love you. It feels very, very real.
The two are different. You can love a 75-year-old grandma who's crossing the street and not lust after her. Same, hopefully, with a child who you feel love towards. Love does not require an expression of lust, and lust does not inherently involve love. Do not fall under the trap of thinking there is something pure and loving about any of what Russell has been accused of doing, because the allegations are very far from it. And then Russell diverts the topic of conversation to a story about how he had a crush on one of his mom's friends when he was a child, so it's not like he has a thing for the very young. If anything, he likes cougars.
So for me, like the age of consent would be something I'd be very alert to and would check. And also, by the way, I'm not like, it's not a kink of mine to like, if anything, it would be, oh no, man.
You'd like the seniors?
Yeah, if anything. I mean, do you know what? I didn't
know that was a thing.
When I was young, when I was really little, I just grew up.
And the takeaway we're meant to absorb from this is, oh, your allegations are not so bad then? Russell, the fact that you're not specifically, or rather exclusively, drawn to the very young doesn't change the immorality of the relationship with the 16-year-old in question. It's like, Your Honor, yes, okay, I did push that woman into traffic, but it was just the one. I promise I don't have a habit of pushing women into traffic. It was just one woman, and I loved her so much, I just wanted her to see eternity. And next in the interview, Megyn plays a clip from the documentary that details the allegations against Russell.
So I'll move on from the women thing in 1 minute, but I want to ask you about one other person who was featured in the documentary, because I think her story illustrates how this whole thing is a lot more complicated than it may look to the outside world. Now, this woman's name is Nadia, and she's featured in this British documentary called In Plain Sight, which details an alleged rape. That's what she says. The problem for Nadia is, and in this, I'm going to play a soundbite from it.
Oh, wow.
It's played by an actress, to your point.
I see.
It's not, whoever Nadia actually is, this is not the actual Nadia. It's some woman claiming, I had this relationship with Russell, and this is the terrible thing that happened to me. And we'll go through it in just a couple of details, but here it is. I think it's Sat 2.
I found it to be quite bizarre how bothered Megyn was by the fact that an actress was portraying one of the alleged victims. To me, it seems like there's a very logical reason why the documentary makers might have made this choice if the victim didn't feel safe telling her own story, showing her face, showing her voice. I mean, we have seen time and time again how victims who speak out about these things end up being the ones to receive death threats, who have to go undercover because their lives are in danger just because they spoke out about their abuse. So it's really odd to me that Megyn would not understand why they would go with an actress portraying her instead. Megyn goes on and gives a little bit more context to this, and Russell doesn't even need to defend the awful allegations we've just been shown. Megyn just goes ahead and does it for him. So then we hear some of what Russell has been accused of.
Again, that was an actress purporting to be this woman based on this woman's testimonial of her relationship with you. She also claims that there was a text message after the fact between the two of you where you sent her a text message at 3:29 a.m. I'm sorry. That was crazy and selfish. I hope you can forgive me. I know that you're a lovely person, X. That you tried phoning her at 3:51 a.m., but the call went unanswered. And she says later in that same day, she went with a friend to a rape treatment center at UCLA Santa Monica Medical Center. She did not go to the police. And then she saw a therapist, and they saw therapy notes from this rape it was all at the rape treatment center where she had those. So that's her story. Then you find out a little bit more in that she says in this text to you, allegedly, this is reported later by the Mirror, Russell, when a girl says no, it means no. Do I have to go and get myself tested? Last time you asked me condom or no condom. When I say condom, that doesn't mean it's optional. You don't have the best reputation. And you responded saying, I pride myself in being safe, trying to make the right decisions. Obviously, this was a bad one. I'm so disappointed in that you wrote, you don't need to get tested. I will make this up to you somehow with love and kindness. Not my original idea, which was more sex. You're being funny here. So this whole text exchange is kind of illuminating to me. And I wonder, because this is somebody who claims she was in a relationship with you. She had consensual sex with you. That particular night, she did not want to have sex with you and that you forced yourself upon her. When you watch that and when you you see that, what's your reaction to it?
And after hearing this, Russell really has no explanation. He just continues his ridiculous conflation, his insistence that he did nothing legally wrong, while also making sure to remind the viewer that he's such a humble, well-intentioned person who doesn't even really want to defend himself. He's just going to have to do it in court because that's the nature of the setting.
Well, I must say, Megyn, it makes me uncomfortable, to tell you the truth, because, as I've said, even whilst I believe that the challenge that I face is one of the misuse of being in a position where lots of people had sex with me, just to even see iterated, albeit by an actor in a documentary, which I think had an agenda, that's my opinion about that.
Well, nor is it journalistically sound to use an actor like that, but that's another problem.
And also to shoot an actor in silhouette as well. If it's an actor, you don't need to shoot them in silhouette. That shows that there's an intention and the type of music being used. But
yep.
I suppose, look, I'm here of course, I sort of think about what's my motivation even in coming on your show? What's my motivation? Am I falling again into the trap of wanting stuff, wanting to be successful, wanting to be powerful, wanting to have influence, wanting to get out of the consequences of my actions? And so what I have to say is my behavior, which my position was consensual and therefore non-criminal, is definitely immoral. And I suppose my job as a follower of Jesus is to focus on how I can follow him more closely. And I don't really, Megyn, get a lot of delight out of going, that person said this, but actually that, although those things will be very important in the trial that I'm facing, because that's the nature of it. I'm being put into a criminal situation.
And he sort of like breaks the fourth wall, where he acknowledges that in court he will need to defend himself and try to prove these women wrong, but that in the current setting he's in a PR role where his goal is to send the message that what he did was wrong.
I'm in a sense trying to manage this in a number of different fields. In the judicial and legal one, it's a matter of course, demonstrating that the encounters that I had were consensual. In a public relations field, which is, I suppose, what I'm in now, I think I have to take the opportunity to say that I'm not saying, so what, these women are lying, they wanted money, who cares, F that. I'm not like, that's not my position. My position is, yes, I recognise that my conduct has caused harm and pain. In a PR situation, like being on the Megyn Kelly show, I think my role and my job is to make it very clear to people that that behaviour, as I describe it, was not behaviour that I would endorse, but it's not non-consensual or coercive behaviour. However, people obviously plainly, as we just saw there, albeit played by an actor, felt hurt by the encounters by me, and so I've obviously got some work to do somewhere.
Well, I think I speak for many of us when I say that I'm very interested in seeing how he does try to defend himself against these allegations in court, because he seemed a little bit lost for words when it actually came down to explaining the concrete accusations in this interview. But then again, since there is a court date coming up, maybe he's not legally allowed to explain himself. I don't have a lot of faith in the court system, but I'm hopeful that this current PR tour won't work against whatever evidence is provided in court, since the latter half of the interview was literally just a circle jerk of two people who agree with each other politically, talking about how they're the victims of the powers that be. I'm going to end it here today. Thank you for watching.